Yo, what's going on, y'all? It's Combo Breaker 99. I'm back with another video. All right, y'all, back with some more boxing talk. Just came across this interview in this article with Danny Garcia. And Danny Garcia, he was speaking on becoming a three-division world champion. As y'all know, he's won world titles at 140. He was a unified champion at 140. And then he became a champion at 147. And now he's looking to move up in weight to 154 and possibly challenge for a world title at 154. So right now, he's not really talking about calling the champs out. He's not calling the champions out, but he wants to move up in weight, fight a few tune-up fights at 154, and get his body acclimated to 154. As y'all know, in the past, Danny Garcia, he did say he gets pretty big, or that he walks around at he can walk around at a higher weight, and he could easily make the weight of 154. But making the weight, to me, and actually being able to take on fighters of that size and strength and power, as what we've seen Danny in the past at 140, 147, I feel like that's a totally different story, And even fighting his way up would be pretty tough. We're not even talking about the champions, which we will get to here in a minute. But, Danny Garcia just saying that he wants to move up in weight and fight at this weight and try to compete. It's going to be tough. I'm not going to lie. It's going to be tough for Danny Garcia because the one thing I've always said about Danny is, at 140, that one thing that really carried him and helped him win most of his fights was his power. It really was his power. I'm not saying he's not a good boxer. He is definitely a good boxer because he definitely sets up his punches. He's a very educated and calculated puncher, but he's not really like he's not really a fast, nimble boxer. He can't really switch that style up and be a volume puncher and be that type of boxer who can win on points in that fashion. That's going to be able to jab and move and get out of danger, out of harm's way, on the balls of his feet. You know what I mean? He can't really be a guy that can just switch it up with styles like that. At 140, Danny, he was more of a flat-footed guy that was using that power to dictate the pace of fights. That's where he was scoring most of his knockouts. And then moving up to 140, as you can see, it was more and more evident. Like I was saying on some of my episodes of my Jab podcast, like I found Danny to be very impressive at 140, but when he got to 147 and the fighters got bigger and the fighters got stronger and the fighters got smarter, it was harder for him to compete with these guys and find other ways to win. When you talk about guys like Keith Thurman, guys that could take his punch, Keith Thurman, they could box, take him to the cards and outwork him and just outslug him as well. Then you had guys that could pressure him like Sean Porter, who beat him as well. And then you had guys like Errol Spence, which will lead into 154. A guy like Errol Spence who pretty much dominated him, outslugged him, outpunched him, outjabbed him, outboxed him. And even at the press conference, the post-fight press conference, Danny Garcia said, well, out of all the guys he's fought and lost to, Errol Spence was the strongest and he had the hardest jab. So that to tell you something, like guys of Errol Spence's size that walk around at a heavyweight and they could possibly move up to 154 themselves, tell you that Danny Garcia will have a problem with the guys at 154, because I don't really think that the weight's going to help Danny as far as improving his punching power or improving his mobility. I think he's going to have more problems dealing with guys like that if he was having trouble with a guy like Errol Spence. If a guy like Errol Spence was out-strengthening him, then he's really going to have trouble, I think. So some of the things he said in the article, like he said, I honestly want to go up to 154. He also stated that he wanted to fight Keith Thurman at 154, and that his goal was to become a three-division world champion at 140, 147, 154. Well, if you're targeting Keith Thurman at 154, you're definitely not going to become a world champion, because everybody knows Keith Thurman is at 147 and he wants to stay at 147. He wants to get his belts back at 147. So Danny Garcia saying he wants to fight Keith Thurman at 154 even for a tune-up fight, that kind of shows you he's not serious, because if he wants to get serious, he's going to need to fight one of these full-fledged junior middleweights to really get acclimated. Because, when you look at the list of guys like Julian J. Rock Williams, even Jared Hurd, who needs to be, to me, at a higher weight, guys like him, Jason Rosario, and, of course, the WBA champion right now, WBO champion, Brian Castano, these guys, they're strong. They're big. They're strong. They're guys that could go up to 160 if need be. They throw punches. They throw high volumes of punches. And if you look at that last fight out with Brian Castano, who's similar pressure fighter, like a early rough version of like Canelo, you know, and the pressure he was putting on somebody like Patrick Teixeira, that makes you think that a guy like that who works would give a guy like Danny Garcia hell, you know, and because that we really have to say, can Danny Garcia have the power to keep a guy like that honest? And my answer to that would be no, because Danny wasn't really flatlining guys at 147. And, you know, he wasn't even rocking the champions at 147 like Spence, the guys he lost to like Spence, Porter, and Thurman. You know, those guys just outboxed him. They took a few of his shots, and then they just kept it rolling. So it's going to be a tough task. Like, if he really does want to go ahead and like get a big payday against one of the champions, I really wouldn't recommend him fight like 3 or 4 fights at 154, because if he does walk around a heavier weight, then it shouldn't take time to get acclimated. Maybe 2 fights at most, you know. Take on one of those guys, like I said, J-Rock. Well, not J-Rock, because I know a lot of people say J-Rock and him represent Philly. You know, they're cut from that same cloth, so no. Maybe somebody like Jason Rosario, or if I'm just looking at the list now, like Tim Tszyu, you know, Kostya Tszyu's son. That would be like a big payday for him. That would be a big payday fight that could potentially lead to, let's talk about the champions, the WBO champion Brian Castano, or the unified champion Jermell Charlo. You know, that's going to lead him to those fights that he wants to really get big paydays again. Now, as far as him winning, that's a little bit that's kind of a fantasy. I won't even say it's a toss up. You know, that's almost like a fantasy. I'm just being real. I like Danny, but him matched up against Jermell Charlo, who is a stablemate with Errol Spence, just lets you know that that's going to be a fight that I just feel like he can't win. They come from the same camp. Not only that, they're going to be giving each other tips if this fight did come to fruition. On top of that, you're talking about a guy who walks around, some people say he walks around nearly 180 to 200 pounds. You know, Jamal and Jermell are big guys, you know, and they cut down to their weights, you know, they're really cutting themselves down to that weight. So to see him go in there against somebody like Jermell Charlo, who trains with Errol Spence, who out-jabbed him, out-strengthed him, and just beat him, and had him come out of the fight looking like he's never looked before, then you could possibly see Danny getting stopped against a guy like Jermell Charlo. You know, Jermell Charlo is a surgical precision puncher. He's more of a boxer than his brother. Like, he's not known for the power, but he's been developing that power. You know, he has a very serious body game, and when he lets his hands go, believe me, Danny will feel those punches. And I don't think Danny has the footwork or the punching power to really keep a guy like Jermell Charlo off of him, you know? So if Jason Rosario couldn't do it, I don't see... Let's put it this way. If Jason Rosario or even Tony Harrison, who's a tall, long guy with a very solid jab, and to me has respectable power, if they couldn't really rock or hurt Jermell Charlo, I don't see Danny Garcia doing that. You know, maybe Danny could become acclimated and box at the weight, feel comfortable, but as far as him, you know, beating Jermell Charlo or even hurting Jermell Charlo, I just don't see that. You know, so if Danny Garcia really wants to finish out his career, I think that he should possibly just hang on at 147 for another few years, maybe wait for Errol Spence to move up to 154, then fight for those vacant titles, or try to reach out for the Dennis Ugas fight, or fight Keith Thurman for another big payday and a non-title fight, because I could see him beating somebody like Tim Tszyu, or even maybe giving Jason Rosario a good tough fight. But Jason Rosario, he's a slugger as well. I think that, you know, Jason Rosario, his power is much more his power is much more known in 154. You know, it's going to be a tough task for Danny Garcia. But if Danny Garcia wants to move up and challenge himself, hey, I have no problem with that, because you know, not too many guys want to call people out. I mean, hey, if he's saying that, look, I want to get a few fights and then fight Jermell Charlo next. If he says, look, I want Jermell Charlo after he fights 1 or 2 fights, feels good, then fine. I'm definitely going to knock that. But I mean, if you just look at it from the outside looking in and just on his past performances, I don't see 154 really doing him a lot of justice. But yeah, man, I just wanted to come back and talk some boxing with y'all. I need to talk more over here, but this was just something interesting to me, because yeah, I like Danny Garcia and I like his talk, and I like to see how he challenges himself, but hopefully he can prove me wrong. But this is just me, you know, from the outside looking in, like I said, and just seeing how he looked in his past few welterweight fights, you know, and then going up against a dangerous dangerous champions in Brian Castano, high volume pressure fighter, and then Jamel Charlo, who's a very solid boxer puncher. You know, I feel like they both have styles that Danny Garcia would really have trouble cracking. You know, as far as codes, I don't see him handling those type of styles when he couldn't handle Porter, Spencer, Thurman. But yeah, guys, that's all I got on this. So let me know in the comment section what y'all think. Do you see Danny Garcia becoming a 3-division world champion, and you know, getting his thorough world title at 154? Let me know, guys. Combo Breaker 99. Make sure y'all subscribe. I'm out. Peace.